Uh, Hi, I'm Nicholas Clark. I've been to some conferences in Frankfurt before, but I've realised this might be the first one I've done a talk at. Someone will correct me if I'm wrong. And this talk is Test NoTtY, or Faking Successful Failure. The time should work. This isn't working though. I've got to do that. Right, so disclaimer. Work. I work at PaperOp. We're running on Linux. We're running on Ubuntu in production. No, what's going on? The cable is a bit loose, I think. I should have to sit on that or something stupid. I need the cat to sit on it. Come on, work harder. Right, so yeah, work runs Linux. Let's not get stressed by this. So what this talk does, I think I've tested on AIX, macOS, BSD, Solaris. It should work on all of those things. It will almost certainly not work on Win32, VMS, NVS, or weirder things because it's very much relying on DevTTY existing. The examples will be using MySQL. Work chose MySQL about 20 years ago and stuck with it ever since. I think if we had a choice and we're starting greenfields now, we'd probably use Postgres, but yeah, if I were you, sorry, I wouldn't start from there. So that's why this talk is the way it is. So it's kind of a talk about passwords and prompts. So how does your database connection get its password? Well, what do my notes say? Yeah. The easiest way is you do it from a config file, but I mean, that's kind of like exfiltration made easy. Anyone breaks into a machine, they can copy the passwords off. That's not very secure. Kind of the next best one potentially is you ask it, like the MySQL prompt there, to prompt for the password. Sorry, you can put the password on the command line, which I mean looks better, but the trouble is that will turn up in your shell history, which someone could steal. And even if you're trying to take measures against that, they can look at the process table and steal your password if they've broken into the machine. So probably the most secure one is interactive prompting. So you see here for the thing, you've got MySQL and you tell it to prompt for a password. There's nothing after there. And even though you've redirected standard in, standard out, standard error, it still pings up a thing saying enter password. Well, how does it do that? Well, it opens the controlling terminal and asks you for your password, and it turns off echoing, and you type your password in, and no one ever saw your password. It's quite secure. Thank you. Yeah. So in Perl, I was told I wasn't drinking enough tea. You can do this. You open DevTTY. You use set the read mode to no echo. You grab a line and then you restore the read mode to echo again because otherwise you can't see what you're typing. And that pretty much does that prompting that we just saw there. Fine. So I got to thinking. So we have various things in production. We have batch jobs in particular, and they run in production and they get their database config from disk, but the access to those machines is restricted. So the security in that way is that if you've broken into that machine, it's probably game over already. It doesn't matter so much. I've also got those machines on my development environment, and I might have a copy down there on a Docker container. And there they've got configuration in a password file, but that's just fine because they're talking to database fixtures, which are also in Git. And the continuous integration system, the CI system, the stuff Lee's been talking about, likewise also finds its config from Git, and that's all just fine. But I realize, I mean, that's cool and good, but we have this third case. We have a bug, and I want to test these batch scripts locally, but I want to test them against production data. And I've got a tunnel available to a read-only database, but the password to that, well, it's kind of the key to the kingdom. That's quite secure. I should be not storing that on disk anywhere. And I thought, I want to be able to test these things, and I don't really want to change any of the code. Is there a way I could get our code to prompt me for a password the way that MySQL, SSH systems, and so on do? And, well, and do it unmodified. So, like, what am I trying to achieve? I want my default behavior unchanged. If there's a password in the config file, grab the password there. I want optionally for it, with a special way of doing it, to prompt for the password. I obviously want to work with redirection so that I can splat the output of my script to a file. And I want my failure to be fast and accurate. And by that I mean that if I I don't want it to hang forever waiting for a password, and I don't want it to go something like, I failed to open the terminal. I want it to go, you didn't configure me correctly, boom, so that the logs look easy and we worked out what we did wrong. So, here are our typical configuration standards in stanzas in JSON. So the top one would be like the dev system. Database, database host name, name of database, password and user, and yeah, wow, secure. And what I want to do for my testing is to have something like the one below, where there's a port because it's an SH tunnel, but the password I'm going to have is undef, so in JSON that's null. And I want, if the password is undef when I read it in Perl, to say, hey, cool, you want to prompt for a password. Cool. So I modify the work database wrapper code to do pretty much this, that extra line. Call this prompt subroutine, and I passed it in 2 parameters of what to say in the case of working and what to say not. There's more in the real code, but particularly I want to put in the username and the hostname that it was expecting to make that part of the prompt. That's read from config, but I don't want to pass the config in. I want this thing to be completely reusable. So what I want that prompt thing to do is on production to say, hey, I'm production, you misconfigured, boom, so that as soon as we deploy, we get error messages. And on the development system, I wanted to go, right, tell me the password, please. And my prompt code, I think it backed up. It did. My prompt code is as trivial as pretty much this. I pass in a logger, that's for testing purposes. I pass in the prompts to use for the error for I didn't open it and the prompt message to show. I validate my parameters. I look for the TTY. If I fail to open the TTY, I call the error code. Otherwise, I grab the password, showing you that no echo stuff, and carry on. Cool. I'm not sure where I am in this talk, but I think I'm okay. What's my timing? Cool, we're good. So, how about? Yeah, I wrote my code, we're sorted, we're now good. So we've got 30 minutes left for questions, but the real thing is, how do I test this? Right. You see, the thing on Unix is that file, dev.tty, always exists. It's part of the file system, not part of your process space. If you're interactive, it opens just fine. If you're a cron job, a CI job, a production system, it fails when you try and open it. So I want to test that production system where open fails. Okay. Now the other way around turns out to be easy. There's a module called IOPTY that creates terminals. So my continuous integration system is golden. It's great there. On the CI system, I use that to create a terminal, and I can test the opens the terminal code with the sudo terminal, and I can test that doesn't open the code without sudo terminal. But you know, if I'm running on a machine there, I'm interactive. I want to drop the terminal. Yeah. I look. How do I do that? Well, there's nothing on cpan to do this. And I think, yeah, but you know, when you're starting a daemon, a classic Unix daemon, you drop the terminal. And it's pretty well described in Stevens, which I did look it up in but didn't bring it, of you fork, you set the session ID, and then if you're daemon proper, you fork again. But that bit of dance with that drops the controlling terminal. It's just that. How hard could that be? So, you know, what I kind of want to do is I want to create a test module where I can run this code. I want to be able to call into this block, and that should fail. I don't know if the microphone's getting me. So I shouldn't return 42, I should return 6 times 9. And I should do that even if running interactively. And that without TTY wrapper should do whatever magic it needs to get rid of my terminal. Basically the module. Well, that's the plan. So, well, what does it do? That's roughly what I said. It forks to make a child process. In the child process, it uses set SID, which is how it drops its terminal, runs whatever, that's the ... 10 minutes. We're actually pretty early. It's not a bug, is it? Drops that, and then calls waitpid to wait for whatever it is to finish. Implementation-wise, if there's code in the block and it throws an exception, that gets sent back to the parent by writing the string down a pipe. I obviously needed that because you saw that previous prompt code. It dies on error. I wanted to test my dies. The return value of my subroutine, I end up having to pass back as the process exit code. Signals, well, Unix process signal handling works just whatever for those. I get those. The parent catches those, and as just how WaitPid works. And as somewhat a hack, if I'm running this test and it just doesn't work, I want to hit Control C and for it to die. So the parent attempts to catch all signals and kill the child with those, which is a hack that works well enough to make Control C work, but do not rely on this to actually write code. So, I mean, the limitations of the side effect of what I just said, it's forked in a child. In that, without TTY block, it's in a child. So there are no side effects. There are... if you pass in a reference and modify things hanging off that reference, it won't be seen. Global state isn't changed. In particular, that means if you're using test more, test simple, and so on, the test counter has diverged. We'll get to that in the next slide. Exceptions are stringified. If you wanted to throw objects, and in the first version of writing some code, I did that and then went, bother. They turned into strings. The return value, as I said, is an integer, basically 0 to 255. That's why my prompt code has to be as simple as possible, kind of thing. And Control C, as I said, catching signals is fragile. It works well enough to kill an interactive test, which was kind of the point of this module, but this is not meant for production code. It's a hack to make tests work. So, yeah, as I said about Test Builder, in the process of writing this, I basically wrote the top code. I kind of knew about this if you're running tests by shelling out to other stuff that prints tap. So you take the Test Builder object, that's that first line, then you find out what the current test number is, and you remember that. Now, I run my tests in another block. They output things happily saying, okay, hopefully okay, maybe not okay, but, you know, 2 more tests happened. And I needed some way to say, oh, I ran 2 tests that you don't know about. Let me tell you about them. And that last line of current test equals cur test plus count, where I add on 2. And that's a whole bunch of work. And I'm going to move. So I posted this up on the Perl QA channel. And Chad Grant on Exodus says, you should use test2 IPC. What's test2? And so, yeah, he's right. You should use test2 IPC because you see that it simplifies down to that thing there. Use test2 IPC, job's a good one. You're done. I thought, but I don't want to depend on test2. And then I found I already had it installed. It's been in the core since I think 5.26. But whatever other things I built, I think it's test warnings, but I'm not sure. Something with its dependency chain had already pulled in the updated test builder. So it's actually quite hard to avoid test2. So basically just use test2. If it's already no real pain, if your work system already has in its dependency tree, just use it. If you're building a CPAN module, it's not a great hardship to put it as a testing dependency and life is good. And that really is it. I could show you the code, but I didn't really think I wanted to. Actually, I haven't prepared it by loading it up, but it's what I said. It's probably as easy to look on it. So that was what we got to. That's going backwards again, the silly thing. Questions? Yeah. You might recognise, like, do bears defecate in the woods? Do one-legged ducks swim in circles? And is the Pope Catholic? All have the same answer. I mean, yeah, is it on CPAN? Yes, as of yesterday on the train. And the other one, yeah, that's true too. There was some suggested questions. Have you got any better questions than those? Oh. Why don't I use expect? Because it.
String, and then as soon as you see that string on the command line turn up, then it will just type things in, and then it also works on Windows.
Why am I not using expect? Because I could just type it in. Because I didn't want to shell out. I really wanted to test a subroutine in the context of running that subroutine. I kind of hadn't considered it, but I thought this would be simpler. And we'll go back to the disclaimer at the beginning. The work code basically has to run on Ubuntu, and so I wasn't jumping through hoops to get it to run on other things. The fact that I had through the GCC compiler farm thing a whole bunch of weird operating systems to test it on meant I did fling it at AIX because it's easy to log into AIX. Well, I can. You can too if you ask them nicely. So no, I didn't think about running expect because I thought I just need to, what I said, forks, SSID and wait period. It's 4 lines, isn't it? It took about 40 lines. Um, yeah, that's a reasonable question. Apparently, you have to find 5 more minutes of questions, or I shall leave the stage. Oh, I shouldn't phrase it like that, should I? No, two. So, Søren, first question. Who put test 2 into the Perl core? I did look at the commit. I've forgotten. It was not me. It goes in at some point. There's clearly some problems with it. It comes out again, and I think there's about 2 releases go past, like 2 years, and then it comes in and lands and sticks. In the sense of it clearly was sufficiently production ready that, I didn't know it happened. I think that's a good sign. I think that shows that it really was solid. Basically, the entire implementation of Test Builder gets replaced with Test 2's internals, and weirdly I think it's this one. They're doing 2 talks and there are 2 modules involved, but I discovered that actually the bug was fixed with the plan being output twice by the change to test 2, and I looked at it briefly and came to the conclusion that there just wasn't a way to do this in the legacy test builder, so I didn't anymore. It was to do with done testing in a process that forked, and I didn't go chasing it. They basically fixed the bug with test 2, and that was it, enough for me, so I gave up trying at that point. Okay, you said Parallel Fault Manager did. I didn't find that, and it didn't. Parallel Fault Manager, I believe, does exist because I think I looked at it in Lee's nodding, which is a good sign. I think I looked at it at a previous employer, who are one of the other sponsors. They're hiring too, in terms of something, but I didn't worry about it dropping terminals. I think we're out of questions. Oh no, another question. Okay. You would solve it another way by having a configuration option. Gotta have a TD. You're saying that what you're saying is valid, and I should repeat it for the recording, that I could make a configuration option, say whether TTY was valid or not. I was taking the kind of ultimate paranoia option that I thought I really wanted the code to enforce bad configurations, because I thought at some point we'd goof it and eventually end up with a development config on production. So I thought this was safer and more robust, and it went into production some months ago, and it hasn't gone wrong yet, and I don't think it will. Yeah, I put a lot more effort into what you're describing is a much simpler system, just having a configuration option on this or not. But the bit that's kind of scary to me is that our small goofs are sometimes cost us more than my credit card limit, and our big goofs, I think, are more than my annual salary. We try very hard not to make these goofs, but that's the sort of risk level we're going at. So I preferred code that I thought just absolutely was going to, if it alerts us within 10 minutes, we can fix it and run batches the same day, and no one knows that everything is smooth. I know I'm on video at this point. But if we mess up, people notice, which is why we take a lot of effort not to mess up, and generally we're reasonably good at that. Robustness was the key here.